Today we studied solving equations, mostly in word problem form in lesson 7. We were trying to get to a two-step looking inequality, which we've been doing in class anyway, and then making sure that you can interpret the solutions in the context of the problem. What does this inequality answer or solution mean? You'll notice that I've added a little something to our video. In the background, I have what I found on Pandora, which is a radio station for classical music for studying. So if you hear a little bit something going on, I thought it might be nice to have a little music in the background. At the top of your problem set, you'll notice this lesson summary. I would suggest that you read over it, and what I have highlighted really are the key points that you need out of here. That the first thing you do is you're trying to make those ones and zeros to get the inequality down to a variable is greater than a number or the variable is less than a number. By adding and subtracting opposites, you'll make your zeros. By multiplying and dividing numbers by their inverses, you'll make ones. And the only thing you really have to remember here in blue, that's the big difference in an inequality as opposed to an equation, is that if you multiply or divide each side of an inequality by a negative number, it reverses the sign of the inequality. The other two paragraphs here are nice information. They're a little bit maybe more advanced than you need to do, but they give you some hints there. If you don't like having decimals and you don't like having fractions in your inequalities, they are some strategies you can use to get rid of them. We didn't address those in class, and I'm not going to, but if you want to read over it, if it makes sense and you want to give it a try, that's of course fine. The other thing you're going to notice about your inequality is that there's not enough room here for you to do your work. You are going to need a piece of scratch paper, or you can do your scratch work on Notability and then simply put your answers on here. So right now, pause the video, open Notability, which I wouldn't want to do because I wouldn't want to go back and forth between things, but that's okay if you want to do that, or get out a piece of scratch paper. If you have scratch paper that you're using, I sure would like for you to attach it to the your problem set. And I think your problem set's blank on the back. You could always just use the back. That would probably be the easiest thing. That way you could turn it in and not have to staple anything or attach it. So we're going to start here with number 1. As a salesperson, Jonathan paid $50 per week plus 3% of the total amount he sells. This week he wants to earn at least $100. Write an inequality with the integer coefficients for the total sales needed to earn at least $100 and describe what the solution represents. Let's start with you writing the inequality and then come back and checking it. I'll show you the correct inequality, then give you some time to solve it. Then you'll need to describe what does your solution actually mean, what does it represent. So we'll do this step by step. First of all, I want you to try and write the inequality on your own and then come back and check your work. So the first thing here is we've got to identify a variable, and what we don't know is the total amount that Jonathan sells. So I've identified that total amount that he sells as T. You might have identified it as a different variable. It doesn't matter as long as you have one. If we go back through the problem, Jonathan is paid $50 per week plus 3% of his total sales, and that needs to be at least $100. So that's got it written in words. Now we need to be able to write it algebraically. The 50 is no problem, the plus is no problem, but you can't work with 3% written with the percent sign. So you've got to go back to that lesson we did before, and how do you write a percent as something you could work with? You could write it as a fraction. Most of you wouldn't want to do that, but you could. So I chose to write mine as a decimal, which would be 0.03 of the total, which means of is a clue to multiply, T, and it had to be at least, so it could equal 100 or it needs to be greater than 100. So the symbol I used is the greater than or equal to sign. What you need to do now, if you haven't already, is to pause and solve the equation. You should now be ready to start solving. You need to check and see, can you make a zero? Is there something you can add or subtract to start getting rid of the constants so you're getting down to the variable? And 50 is that constant. So by subtracting 50 on both sides, we've got the first step of this equation. Brings us to 300ths t's greater than or equal to 50. Now we want to make a 1 by dividing by 300ths on both sides. and you find out that T is greater than or equal to 1,666 and 6/10 repeating. Well, we're talking about purchases, we're talking about money, and you're never going to see a price tag that's got a 6 repeating. So it needs to be rewritten as T would be greater than or equal to $1,666.67 when you round it to the nearest penny. So what does that mean? That means that Jonathan must sell at least $1,666.67 in order to earn at least $100. For number 2, there are 2 parts to the problem. You'll see part A and part B. This is not a multiple choice question. It means there are 2 things that you need to do to go along with this problem. Systolic blood pressure is a higher number in the blood pressure reading. It's measured as the heart muscle contracts. Heather was with her grandfather when he had his blood pressure checked. The nurse told him that the upper limit of his systolic blood pressure is equal to half his age increased by 110. A is the age in years, and P is the systolic blood pressure in millimeters of mercury. Write an inequality to represent this situation. So right now we're going to write the inequality. In part B, you have to solve it and then find his systolic blood pressure. Please do this and then come back and check. In words, we've got that his blood pressure should be less than or equal to half his age increased by 10. The upper limit of his blood pressure. So his blood pressure can't be any higher than half his age increased by 110, which is why I've got the less than or equal to sign. Now algebraically, that would be P is less than or equal to, I changed half to a decimal, 0.5 times his age plus 10. Next step, solve the inequality. This is the equation that we wrote in part A, and you see here in part B that his age is 76. So for the variable A, you substitute in 76. So P is going to be less than or equal to 0.5 times 76 plus 110. Not going to that meeting. And P is less than or equal to 38 plus 110. So P, his systolic blood pressure, should be less than or equal to 148. So what does that mean as you interpret your answer? It means that the normal systolic blood pressure for his age is at most 148. The family's going to worry if it gets up to 149, 150, 152, but as long as it stays at 148 or below, that would be considered normal. Tracy collects donations for a dance marathon. One group of sponsors will donate a total of $6 for each hour she dances. Another group of sponsors will donate $75 no matter how long she dances. What number of hours to the nearest minute should Tracy dance if she wants to raise at least $1,000? First step is to write your inequality and then come back and check your work. So here's what we know. Tracy's got donations and she wants to raise at least $1,000. Her donations come from 2 places, from getting $6 per hour for every hour that she dances, and a sponsor's just going to give her $75. She wants to raise at least $1,000. Written as an inequality, we'd need to know that H would represent the hours that she danced, 6 times the hours that she danced, and her $75 from her sponsor have to be greater than or equal to 100. Greater than or equal to works for at least. Now that you have the inequality, please solve. First of all, if you noticed I wrote down 100 in my equation instead of 1,000, you'll notice that I did correct it. I caught my mistake. And now we need to start solving. First, you make a 0 of that constant. Get rid of the 75 on both sides. Now I've got 6h equals 925. Now I make a 1. When I have 6 times h, the inverse is to divide by 6. When I divide by 6, h has got to be greater than or equal to 154 and 1 and 1600ths with the 6 repeating, or written as a fraction, that's 154 and 1/6. Okay, that's great. That's hours. But we're supposed to figure it out, if you look back at the question, to the nearest minute. Okay, so how many minutes is 0.16 repeating of an hour, or 1/6 of an hour? In this case, the fraction's actually the easiest thing to work with. It means that she has to dance 154 hours and 1/6 of an hour. 1/6 of 60 minutes is 10 minutes. So Tracy's got to dance 154 hours and 10 minutes. Jack is 3 years more than twice his younger brother Jimmy's age. If the sum of their ages is at most 18, find the greatest age that Jimmy could be. If you would please write the inequality and then come back and check your work. What we don't know is Jimmy's age. So first we need a variable for Jimmy's age. J made sense to me. Then we need to figure out Jack here. Jack is 3 more than twice Jimmy. 3 years more than twice Jimmy. So we could have an expression to represent Jack that's 3 plus 2 times J, twice Jimmy. Now we want to know their sum of their ages is at most 18. So Jimmy, the J, plus 3 plus 2J, Jack, has to be less than or equal to 18. Please now solve the inequality. So in order to work this one, I put those steps down along the side to help me remember. Had to pause the video, didn't want to break our mood by having a commercial in it. Okay, well friends, these are the steps we go through in order to solve an equation or an inequality. This is what we abbreviated, what was on your flip book. Grouping symbols, like terms, variables, add or subtract to make a 0 on both sides, multiply or divide on both sides. So if you look, we don't have any grouping symbols, but we do have like terms. We've got J and 2J that needs to be combined to 3J plus 3. We don't have variables on both sides, but we do have addition here that needs to be undone and make a 0. To undo adding, you would use the inverse, which is subtract or -3. We're down to 3J is less than or equal to 15. Now we're multiplying or dividing. The inverse here is to use division, dividing by 3 on both sides. So Jimmy is less than or equal to 5, which means Jimmy is 5 or less years old. Number 5, Brenda has $500 in her bank account. Every week she withdraws $40 for miscellaneous expenses. How many weeks can she withdraw the money if she wants to maintain a balance of at least $200? Please write the inequality, and then we'll check that before we start working. Shortening the word problem down to the basics can help you write the inequality. She has $500. Every week she withdraws $40 weekly, and she wants to have at least $200 in her bank account. What we don't know is how many weeks she can make this withdrawal. So our variable needs to be something that represents weeks. I chose to use W. So 50 minus 40W has to be at least, which means it could equal 200 or it's got to be more than 200. So we use the greater than or equal to sign for 200. Now solve the equation. This is where we left off. Again, I made the steps over here on the side. Grouping symbols, like terms, variables on both sides, add or subtract, multiply or divide. No grouping symbols, no like terms on one side of the inequality, no variables on both sides, so we have to add or subtract to make a 0. The way to add or subtract to make a 0 is to get rid of this 500 by subtracting 500 on both sides. When you bring down your work, you've got to make sure you've got this subtraction or negative sign in front of your 40W, and 200 minus 500 is negative 300. Dividing by negative 440 on both sides to make a 1, and then reversing the symbol because you multiplied or divided by a negative number, and in order to make sure that's true, it's got to go the other way. The weeks would be 7 5/10 or 7 1/2. You can't have half a week, so what we know is she can withdraw $40 for 7 weeks to maintain a balance of $200. Number 6, the scooter travels 10 miles per hour faster than an electric bicycle. The scooter travels for 3 hours and the bicycle travels for 5.5 hours. Altogether, the scooter and the bicycle travel no more than 285 miles. Find the maximum speed of each. Write the inequality, come back and check your work. All right, if we start with the scooter travels 10 miles faster than an electric bicycle. What we don't know is how fast the bicycle travels. So the bicycle would have to be our variable of x, and then the scooter's x plus 10 because it goes 10 miles faster. The scooter is going to go for 3 hours. The bike's going to travel for 5.5 hours. You may remember from science that distance equals rate times time or speed times time. So we'd have to take 3 times for the 3 hours times the speed. And for the bike, we'd have to take 5.5 hours times the speed. Giving this the inequality that you see here. Go through all of your steps and then come back and check your work. Write down that mnemonic to help you remember. Now you can see the solution. The bike would have to, max speed is 30 miles per hour. The scooter is 40. And your secret is the music that's playing. The secret is the music that's playing in the background. We'll talk about this more tomorrow.